Welcome to Crypto Sapiens, a show that hosts lively discussions with innovative Web3 builders to help you learn about decentralized money systems, including Ethereum, Bitcoin, and DeFi. The podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it is not financial advice. Crypto Sapiens is presented in partnership with WellnessDAO, a movement for pioneers seeking freedom from the limitations of the traditional financial system. WellnessDAO will help the world go bankless by creating user-friendly on-ramps for people to discover decentralized financial technologies through education, media, and culture. Hello and welcome back to Crypto Sapiens. I'm excited to be chatting today with Zeez and Eric, co-founders of WellnessDAO. Many times, especially in Web3, I think, we find ourselves putting off our mental health and well-being in order to keep up with all the development news and speculation. So today, we'll explore this topic framed by the personal journeys of Zeez and Eric and WellnessDAO. We kick off the discussion learning about their own wellness practices, such as yoga, meditation, and journaling, and how it influences how they connect and engage with their community. We also discuss how NFTs can be used to promote and reward participation and align the community as a whole. Lastly, we close out on a conversation about the importance of having a clear mission to inspire a strong culture and future development of the DAO. So let's get started.
I'm Zeez. I am currently living in San Francisco, but actually about to move to New York in 5 days. My background is I actually started my career in TradFi and, was working at a investment bank and financial advisory. And so, I do feel like there is still quite a big culture gap between, the contingents of people who work in TradFi and who have this conventional understanding of financial markets and financial assets. And, at the other end of the spectrum is the deep, OG Bitcoiners, so to speak, who have been in Bitcoin since, 2013, since the early days, 2008. And so that was sort of the context that I grew up in and started my career in. While I was there, I learned about the asset class and, as a young person, figured it made sense to diversify, even if I didn't really understand the technology itself or, didn't really understand the value of it. It's just good to have your money across lots of different places and, not just in the S&P and not just in, real estate or not just in bonds. So I started investing, a very standard on-ramp, buying a few, a couple $100 of Ethereum and Bitcoin every month. But over time, as I transitioned out of that industry into what I do now, which is early stage investing, I started hearing more about Web3, about the consumer and social applications that are built on top of it, about NFTs, about DeFi, and really this Cambrian explosion of different use cases for this underlying decentralized compute system that people were building. As we're starting to realize now, a lot of those use cases are not really use cases. They are, yield farms, or they are Ponzi schemes, or they are marketing schemes built on top of the core technology. But I think that there ends up being this interesting conflation of the two between, what is quote unquote blockchain technology and what are its capabilities versus what are the use cases or what are the consumer facing experiences that we have today using the blockchain. So that is, the area that I'm continuing to explore and invest behind is like, what are real infrastructure? What are meaningful applications of decentralized computing systems that we should manifest into the universe? And also, how do we not recreate the same, misaligned incentive systems that we saw in Web 2? How do we create a new world order and a new culture of mutual support and care? I've heard it described as like a collective capitalism. The fact that sort of this financialization of digital assets can empower a collectivist capitalism as opposed to a centralized capitalism. And, whether or not we deliver on those things, it's still super early to tell. But I think that's a lot of my underlying motivation and interest in the space is just, how do we envision a more optimistic and a more egalitarian future that is not, the way that we live today, which certainly has a lot of advantages and has a lot of benefits, but also leaves a lot to be desired in terms of decentralizing power and decentralizing data and decentralizing access to capital. So that's been about me.
That's great. Thank you. That's quite comprehensive. And even there, I think that there's a lot that I would like to explore and unpack as we go through the conversation. But Eric, why don't we go ahead and give you a chance here to give you an introduction about yourself and same like kind of that crypto journey you've had up to co-founding WellnessDAO.
For sure. Thanks for having us once again. My name is Eric. I am based in New York City. I also used to live in San Francisco. I recently moved here in the middle of last year. My crypto journey has been quite interesting. So I started my career in Web2 at Salesforce and big tech, was a software engineer. Then I moved to kind of the sales and solution side, running a pre-sales team. And I've always been a huge enthusiast in crypto. I was investing on and off, shit coins or altcoins, but me and my buddies would trade them on KuCoin. So I always have been a kind of fan of the kind of retail investing side and buying and trading. And then recently, last year around this time, when I started to go in a deep rabbit hole about NFTs, and I learned that, obviously there's like a ton of FOMO in the space. There's a ton of blue chip projects. And in the beginning, I was also in it to make a quick flip. But then I realized there's so much utility behind it. And the whole space brings about so much interesting utility by token gating things. Yeah, so we just thought that, now the technology is here. Now blockchain provides a utility for, let's say, instructors and teachers to be rewarded financially and incentivize people to Zeez's earlier point about decentralizing, these big systems. So like content creators on YouTube, they put out their content, but YouTube owns it, right? So I was thinking, I've been a yogi for quite a while, started practicing maybe in 2016. I recently finished my teacher training. So I was thinking, yeah, we should reward these, fitness instructors, these meditation teachers, and they should be able to own their own content in this new ownership economy and collect royalties on it. So that's when we kind of came together. I met Zeez through a mutual friend, and we decided to start, WellnessDAO. And our vision for this is just to promote these mindfulness practices. We don't want to token gate it. You don't have to buy to join our community. But, eventually we did want to do an NFT drop and, reward holders by going to retreats and doing more in-person utility and bringing that aspect to things. As far as like my wellness journey, I started to embark on a spiritual path as I was exploring different martial arts, discovering my true self, trying to figure out what stuck. I ended up really identifying with practices like yoga and meditation. And as the pandemic hit, I started to dive deeper and fuller into my practice. And that's when I realized yoga is, it's a form of self-expression. It counters the stagnant energy that we have all day sitting at our desk job. It's a movement, it's a meditation. So it really helps me, just find my own space in the mornings every day. And I finished my 200-hour yoga teacher training and would like to share this practice with others. So that's kind of our vision for WellnessDAO, is to just really, bring this to everyone, just really share what we know and build a community around all these different practices.
That's wonderful. And thank you so much again for the comprehensive introduction. Similarly to what Zeez was saying, I think that there's a lot to unpack here. And you kind of nicely led us into my first question. And that is, how have your personal wellness practices, right? What that means to you, influenced those processes maybe that have been developed for WellnessDAO?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. But basically, yeah, I came from it, from a yogi's perspective of, everyone's on their own path, right? I'm by no means like a master or, like more advanced than anyone. Yoga is a practice where we cater to all levels, right? And the most important part is showing up, and just showing up to the mat, and just, setting aside time for yourself, and knowing that time is like interrupted. You don't have to think about what's next. You think about, you're just there, you're fully in the moment. So we really wanted to kind of like build community around these practices, to have people to share this with, right? To have people to, practice together, discuss together. So that's where I think the community aspect of Web3 is so strong. So it made complete sense to, integrate and start this.
I love that. Zeez, do you have any, wellness practices that are important to you that get you through your day, or maybe that's how you kick off your week, that you feel are crucial to the design and processes at WellnessDAO?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Eric's point around showing up, and, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be best at something, but, the act itself and the act of showing up for yourself and carving out that space for yourself is really important. So for me, I'm a very active journaler, and so I journal every night. It's sort of like how I close off my day before I, go to sleep. And I think more broadly, it ties into a practice of self-reflection and, constantly thinking about what I am grateful for, and what, there's so much to be grateful for and so much optimism in the world. And I think that really in Web3, there's always a lot happening. And so it can be, relatively easy to jump around from place to place and sort of lose sight of the flow and the underlying act of just showing up being enough. And so that's sort of how we wanted to encourage people to think about Web3 as well, is, there's so much in the mix. You can get caught up and overwhelmed and burnt out if you try to do everything all at once. And even just a simple act of showing up, learning one new thing a day, or writing, one thing you're grateful for, is in itself plenty. And just this constant cycle of self-reflection and holding yourself accountable to whatever emotions or experiences you may be having. I think that's something that, currently I feel like we, somewhat lack as a broader culture in Web3, just this sort of self-regulation and showing up for yourself. And that's sort of what we wanted to provide an opportunity for people to do as they come to WellnessDAO and to other similar communities and other, places where there's so much focus on the moving forward and learning more and, making yourself better, making more money, etc. But sort of coming back into the present moment and saying what I have already is enough, and I'm grateful for all of that already.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's beautifully put. I think that there's something along that, I guess that's a common thread between yoga practice and journaling, and that is the state of being present in the moment, right? Whether it is, by focusing on a pose, breathing exercises, or pen to paper, and just being mindful of what it is that happened that day that you want to document and then just kind of meditate on. I think that's a really powerful connection between the two. And I think that's really important and amazing to hear that, WellnessDAO has these practices that allows for their community to, kind of practice these things mindfully and hopefully get into a better mental state.
I want to also highlight how wholesome the community is. We have a journal together channel, and which is kind of Zeez kind of the instigator of this idea, but kind of just jump on a call and you go over a few journal prompts, and people, jump in the voice channel and just vibe, right? And, maybe you're sharing your prompts, maybe you're not, but it's just so wholesome to me, just this community and the people that we've brought together to do these things together, to do these practices together.
Yeah, Zeez, do you want to talk a little bit about some of those journaling prompts? Maybe share what you would potentially share with community there, and then maybe even describe some of the experiences that the community has shared back in terms of either A, this has helped me to be more mindful in this, or just something or the other like that.
Well, so yeah, the journaling together started actually rather spontaneously. I think we just had a voice channel, and we're playing music in it, and so I would just hop on the voice channel and be journaling, and people would join in as they so choose. It's not a very like rigorous practice of, oh, we have to go on at, XYZ time and you have to show up every day. And, we encourage people to share their journal entries, but they don't have to. Of course, it's a deeply personal experience. But, I think the overarching takeaway, again, that I always come back to is like, doing a little bit of something is better than doing nothing. And so it doesn't, nothing that you do when it comes to wellness has to be perfect or comprehensive or, the gold standard. It's just about showing up again and again. And some of the prompts that now we're starting to work through and starting to talk about, maybe putting together a cohorted program or a, more organized offering around, I think are, very similar to what you would see in therapy or in sort of cognitive behavioral therapy and this, medically driven process of getting to know yourself better. Oftentimes it's done in reaction to things. When you start to feel like things are not going well, you may want to seek treatment. But I think these are practices that don't necessarily have to come just when something is wrong. My therapist said something to me that was really interesting. Said, I went to school and I have a PhD and I'm a doctor and all of these things, but at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. It's just sitting down and verbalizing and processing and talking through your feelings, which if you think about biologically, in the course of evolution, like how did sapiens evolve to live? We started off in smaller groups, in groups of, sort of the social studies that have been done in groups of, 10, 20, 30 people. So much smaller, more intimate communities. There was a lot more free time, sort of, free time that was very different from the free time that we have now, in which you just sit on a rock and talk about your feelings or just talk about what's going on around you. And I think, as a society, there's been a bit of, this push towards always being busy and always, hustling towards something and less of a focus on turning inwards and really internalizing, what is going on around me and how am I processing these things and not suppressing, everything that's going on at once. And so some of the prompts come back to, what are like my core values, like what motivates me every morning to get up and do the things that I do. What is my attachment style and how do I, communicate and bond with other people? What is my, what are the manifestations of the ways in which I respect myself, in which I care for myself, in which I love myself, which by the way are all very different things, right? We talk about self-care a lot in the wellness industry, but self-care is just one piece of it, and it's not comprehensive. You can do all the self-care practices in the world, and you can, journal every night and do yoga and drink a tea and whatever. But if you don't have, an underlying sense of self-esteem or an underlying sense of self-respect, it's really one of those things where the sum of the parts is much greater than the whole, and it's a very holistic, integrated practice. So those are sort of the things that we're thinking through, and how do we incorporate those at scale. Obviously, it's a much harder question than just asking these questions in the universe and hoping that people answer them, because it does require a lot of investment and a lot of self-reflection. And that's something that we're trying to think about is like, how do we use, how do we like build up a product or sort of like technology around this sort of accountability such that, maybe you have like a public ledger that records when you do these little check-ins, maybe not the data in the check-in itself, since that's deeply personal, but, even like this accountability mechanism. And then, is there an incentive structure that you can put in place in which people can earn something, earn tokens, earn coins, whatever, in order and hold each other accountable. Can you put in place group mechanisms where the group as a whole has to commit to working towards something together, and if one person doesn't do it, then the group as a whole loses something. And so those are sort of like the structural things that we're thinking through. If you've heard of a group called Mochi, they do stuff like this, and they run sort of these cohort-based sprints, similar to how like engineering sprints work in tech, I think. And so, how do we integrate all these different learnings from what are productive ways to collaborate and to work together. But more towards the angle of how do we not create economic value or productivity, but how do we create a greater sense of understanding ourselves and understanding others and building this long-lasting self-awareness and emotional intelligence that pays a lot of dividends into the future.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that comes to mind, and I know when we talk about wellness, it's maybe the first things that come to mind are like the very, positive outcomes. But, maybe we fail to recognize that we seek wellness because of the chaotic space that we live in. What informs our choice to want to seek out these wellness practices, right? So currently, and I think around the world and for some time, we've been living in a chaotic space. And now, even in our ecosystem, the Web3 space, market changes affect people's ability to focus, people's ability to be happy. Certainly, I think that there's something to be said about like allowing yourself to live outside of this very, very small niche community, right? And maybe take a walk outside and say, oh, well, it's not that bad. But I wonder, some of the thoughts that happen within the WellnessDAO in terms of maybe someone coming in and saying, oh, like I'm always FOMOing into things, or right now the market's, changing. And so this is all affecting my mental health, my mental well-being, my ability to be positive, my ability to contribute. What are some of the things that you would say to someone who's coming in like that? And what is the track that maybe they could very easily jump into and find maybe a more balanced way of like thinking?
I feel like I'm victim to this. There's so many projects and like so much alpha and trying to, get the next blue chip and trying to mint. But at the end of the day, to me, I think you just have to let go, right? It's way easier said than done. But, at the end of the day, it's just knowing that we can't make everything. So we do internally have some discussions around this too, is like, what are we minting? What are we, buying? And we're in the crypto space, so that's all fair. But at the end of the day, sometimes, you just have to be okay without, right? And just know that you're not going to make everything. So that's why, we promote these mindfulness practices. It's all about balance, right? And like, understandably so, there's going to be drops we miss out on, right? There's going to be whitelists that we don't get. But, to me, it's like, okay, whatever, right? Like, work on yourself because health is wealth, right? Like your mental health should be a priority. Right now, it's like this afterthought, once we feel burnt out, then we turn to wellness. So we really want to flip the script on that and change the narrative to prioritize and make this a daily lifestyle, daily habit, and daily routines. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'll just share a story about myself. Like previous to COVID and being in lockdown, I used to go to my yoga instructor regularly and just practice. I got so much out of that. But, post or mid-COVID and post-COVID, I've just tried to bring that home and just try to find a way to like replicate that as best I can. But one of the fun things is my kid, I have a toddler. She loves taking out the second yoga mat and practicing next to me. And it's such a beautiful, enjoyable experience, not just to be able to like try to find a center, like trying to get myself back to just being mindful and, being happy and grateful, but also to see that there is an influence and a thoughtfulness that you could also kind of share and that is echoed within some of the, the rest of your family. In my case, my young daughter. So it's really a really cool experience to be able to share that. So walk me through like what happens when someone discovers WellnessDAO. Like what's the process? So they hear of you through this podcast, or they find you on Twitter, they join the Discord. What are some of the things that they can do to get started? I heard something about an NFT drop. How is that connected? How are you using that to engage the community, to enhance that connection to the DAO?
So when someone hears about WellnessDAO, I mean, in its existing form, it's a community that you can come to learn about new practices. And so what we usually recommend is follow us on socials, follow us on Twitter, hop in the Discord where most of these conversations happen. We host virtual programming in the form of, guided and social meditations, that sort of thing. But by no means are those, requisite or, something that you have to do to be a part of the community. I think it's, something that we want to offer just as a public good or as a free service so that people can, start to take action on their wellness practices. There, some people who want to be more involved, choose to become contributors and sort of take on part of the engineering work or the marketing or sort of the day-to-day operations of what's happening in order to schedule events. And we've been hosting some external sessions for other groups as sort of like a DAO to DAO or like a B2B mechanism. And so some of the legwork that is involved there, we have contributors that help out with that. And ultimately we want to bring the community into physical IRL form. And so we host events in hub cities where there are people from our team to plan them. And so historically we've done events in New York, SF, and Miami. And so we're hoping to, host a few more events in New York this summer. Typically they're centered around a practice or centered around yoga or meditation or breath work, generally very chill, no experience required, that type of thing. And we just find that it's a very different type of event profile than, what you usually see in Web3, which is more, social mingling or, having drinks or, going to a party, that type of thing. So that's the pipeline. And so we don't have an NFT yet, or we don't have a membership NFT. We issue NFTs for participation in sessions. And these are sort of, you can think of them more as POAPs, as, things that we issue, and they don't have any monetary value, but it's more a token of, hey, thanks for coming to the sound bath. Now you get this cool 3D artwork that we designed of our logo and with the metadata that attests to when the session was, what you did, et cetera, et cetera. And, we're hoping to incorporate some of this participation into the actual membership NFT itself. Maybe there should be a discount or maybe there should be a, premier access point for people that have participated historically. But I think, given where we're how dynamically NFT and token markets are evolving right now, we are always trying to be more cautious and err on this side of not wanting to issue things that have financial value, such that people may, we don't want to contribute to the noise of people, losing money on things when that's not something that is a requisite right now to participate in the community.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know certainly there's something to be said about alignment of values, access to maybe sustaining members that have contributed to the growth of a project, have added or have made an impact, right? I think a lot of that is interesting. Mm-hmm. I think NFTs is one way. Certainly, obviously, I think both of you are very familiar with some other maybe non-transferable ways of doing that, like through verifiable credentials. So it's really interesting to kind of see how the technology may contribute to the ways that we can evolve and build out our communities and certainly align ourselves a lot more closely, along these shared values. And I just wanted to highlight one thing that I think you've now said a few times, and that is, things not being perfect, just showing up. I think in terms of wellness, it's important to also recognize that for new contributors or new members to a DAO, it is incredibly stressful to identify, well, first of all, to learn, what a project stands for and to identify if there's any alignment with who you are and your own personal mission, just generally in life or in Web3. And then to identify where they could potentially add value. So I think it's worth repeating that similarly to wellness practices, for contributors coming in, it's like, look, you showing up is actually already a big part of your contribution to the space. You came in, you connected with us, you shared, that energy with us. And if you choose to contribute in any other way, it's not going to be perfect. I think we're all kind of growing and experimenting this space together. And so it's okay. Like, identify what really vibes with you and how you feel that either your skill set or your passions can translate to this space and to the mission of our project. And in this case, WellnessDAO.
Yeah. And I think that, to your point about there's a lot of different moving pieces. Like, I think that's why mission becomes more important in building a DAO rather than, a traditional startup or a company, where mission is not a huge part of the transaction, of the sort of expected value that a contributor gets to the organization. Like, obviously it helps, companies that have strong mission alignment and can build teams around that. Amazingly different modality of building a company. And we see this in early stage startups too. You can tell which teams have alignment of mission and which don't. And I think when it comes to DAOs, you have to have that. It's no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have in order to scale this more decentralized, self-identifying contributor model.
And that's a wrap. I truly enjoyed my chat with Zeez and Eric, and I hope you did too. To learn more about them, please follow them on Twitter at BienAmi and the Web3 Yogi, respectively. And to learn more about WellnessDAO, go to their website at wellnessdao.live and on Twitter at WellnessDAO. All links are available in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Crypto Sapiens. If you could give us a 5-star review wherever you enjoy your podcast, it would mean the world to us. Also, follow us on Twitter at CryptoSapiens_, and find our archives on our website at cryptosapiens.xyz. I look forward to reconnecting with you at our next discussion.